and welcome to Crafting a Revolution, the podcast. My name is Katie Freeman, and I'm one of your hosts. Every week, we bring you interviews with makers of all kinds from all over the world who identify as female or non-binary. This episode's guest is Nicole Crowder. Nicole Crowder Upholstery is a Black-owned furniture and upholstery studio creating commissioned, generational, one-of-a-kind pieces of furniture and home furnishings like meditation pillows, poufs, and more. Nicole's work has been commissioned by the leading hotel chains, restaurants, and spaces. She has also created bespoke pieces for private clients and has been featured in design publications including Architectural Digest, Elle Décor, and Martha Stewart Living. Nicole began her journey into upholstery design after spending her childhood traveling and often moving with her family. It sincerely was a great pleasure getting to chat with Nicole, who is currently located in the Twin Cities, so a Midwesterner like myself. And we got to really kind of talk some nuts and bolts about like taking your work to that next level and working with places such as World Market like Nicole does. So a great conversation. Before hopping into that conversation with Nicole, I want to give a big shout out and thanks to the patrons over on Patreon. So thank you so much, Candace at CJ Woodgrain, Lee at Lee Runyon, Annette 513 Woodworks, Katie Thompson, Women of Woodworking, Kevin Lefty's Woodshop, Christy Twisted Twine, Jeremy Speece, Sammy, Go Sammy Lee, Rachel, Moody Makes, Bonnie, Toolmom Bonnie, toolmomstore.com, Laura, Oakley Soap Company, Brandy, Studio, Obey, Lee, The Rainbow Carver, Ellen, Little Bear Furniture, and Ethan Carter Designs. Thank you all so very much for your continued ongoing support, helping to produce this podcast. If you are enjoying this podcast and would like to help support it, please stick around to the end of the episode and I will tell you how to do that. And let's head on into the conversation with Nicole. Well, Nicole, I like to start the podcast by asking my guests to introduce themselves. Would you do that for me?
Absolutely. So my name is Nicole Crowder, and I am a furniture designer and an upholsterer. I'm currently based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Awesome. And also, can I ask what your pronouns are?
Yes, my pronouns are she and her.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So you said you're now in the Twin Cities. Does that mean you are not from the Twin Cities?
So it's kind of a complicated question because I've lived here the longest out of any span in my life, but I grew up as a military kid.
Okay.
And I just moved back to the Twin Cities after having lived in DC for about 15 years. So we were born in Germany and traveled all over, lived all over the US, in Germany and Japan. And then I settled on the East Coast basically for growing into adulthood. That's where I got my first job and was bouncing between New York, DC, over to the West Coast a little bit. And then in December 2020, I decided that, as much as I love DC, I felt kind of pulled to leave. So that's what brought me back to Minneapolis. So I've been here now for almost a year and a half. Yeah.
Okay. And decided to move amidst a pandemic.
Listen, my timing, it's one of those things where I'm like, I lean into the pivot, whatever time it is. And I like nothing honestly was propelling me to leave DC. It was amazing. Business was wonderful there. I felt like I had a foothold in terms of upholstery and clients because there were so few upholsterers there. But I just remember I was on my balcony around June of 2020, and maybe it was the glass of wine. I don't know. But I was like, I feel like, DC is giving me so much, but I'm kind of ready for a change and a shift. And so my thought was to move to LA, actually. I was like, we're going to go for warmer pastures, big apartment, all that. And so many other elements kind of came together around the holidays when I moved or came back to Minnesota to visit my family. And there was really something that was just like, no, Minneapolis is where you should be right now, closer to my family. I can really slow down and sort of rework or rethink how I wanted to work because I was just, foot on gas pedal, even in the midst of a pandemic, which was wild. And so I'm really grateful that even though I hadn't planned that shift, it's worked out so much to allow me to reframe, rework how I just move and operate differently. And I'm happy to, get into
Mhm.
some of the sort of specifics of that as well, how those changes have really been, into action.
Yeah, and we definitely will. I guess at first I want to say I don't think you're like alone. I know that a
Hmm.
large percentage of like people, especially in the US, have like kind of taken a step back and said like, what do I want to do with this? It's like the
Yeah,
kind of great big moment of change. I mean, I know
absolutely.
I know that's what ended up driving me to like applying to grad school and stuff. It was just like, I don't want to do this. Like,
Yes.
you know,
And whatever that this is for you individually,
yeah,
it's like whether it's the job, whether it's the location where you
yeah.
are, whether it's the way that you are working on your job, even if you do love it.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah, I mean, it's been such a radical shift for people. I think half of my friends have moved back to their hometowns.
mm-hmm,
Another friend just announced he was moving back to New Jersey after also having lived in DC for about 15 years. And I love it so much. I love that sort of intuition,
mm-hmm,
being like, okay, there's something happening here internally as well as externally, and I'm leaning into that.
mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I want to take a step back and just dig in maybe a little bit more about like kind of your roots of like furniture and upholstery. Like, how did you get into it?
So I started really sort of serendipitously. An RA of mine from college, actually, at the time I was working as a freelance photographer for apartment therapy. So I was going to her home to photograph her place with her husband. And it was like the first time that I really noticed chairs. I had seen them my whole life, of course, but hers just really like something stood out. And I was like, oh, where'd you get these? And she told me about a fantastic place in Maryland called Ryan's Relics. It's in Bel Air, Maryland, just like 15 miles north of Baltimore. And so I went out there and they had tons of just amazing mid-century furniture. It was two full warehouses. And I bought a few pieces, went to the fabric store, bought some really inexpensive fabric. And then just through like a lot of trial and error, I was taking these chairs apart, putting them back together. And I posted on Facebook maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks later, and a woman came by, and turns out she was an architect. And she was like, oh, do you have, a showroom with more of these pieces? And I was like, oh, this is literally my living room right here. I don't, I just started this. But she said, she was like, well, this is more than just a niche or a hobby. This is a niche. This is something right here that a lot of people across the city could really use.
Mhm.
And the wheels just got turning for me. And I was on Craigslist at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning every day looking up furniture. I was on YouTube, going down the YouTube rabbit hole of videos and how to, because it's all been self-taught.
Mhm.
And what I've learned over the years, like every chair just requires different mechanics, different techniques, different strategy. And so I love learning that way. But I was still working full time as a photo editor, but I just had this itch that I wanted to try something different. And so I was at a farmer's market, my very first farmer's market, and I sold everything but one piece that
Wow.
afternoon. And it just blew me away. And so I was like, oh, we're going to go full time, full steam ahead. And I tell you, it was the biggest ego check of my life and career because there was so much I did not know. Literally, it was less than a year experience doing this. Didn't understand, money management, time management. I had moved actually out of DC to Baltimore, about 40 miles north, because I just assumed DC was too expensive to live. But I didn't have any sort of structure about me. I was commuting an hour each way every day,
Mhm.
picking up, dropping off client work, making mistakes, and all of that. As hard as I was working, I still was quite broke. I didn't have a dime to my name. I even went to McDonald's one time thinking I was going to get, some fries off the dollar menu. And when the lady said it was 2.12, I was like, what is this inflation? I just couldn't even get $2.12
Right.
French fries.
Right.
And that's when I was just like, okay, you need to take several steps back and reframe and reposition. And I did. I called my former boss, who thankfully I still had a good relationship with, and I asked if I could go back to work, honestly, because upholstery had broken my heart. I felt like a failure. I felt like I
Mhm.
didn't plan. I was leaping before I had anything kind of built. And so I was doing photo editing for a couple of years after that, but upholstery was always, always still there. Like I had built a website, didn't even have chairs, didn't have clients. It just had this feeling. I had some sketches, but I was like, I love doing this, and there's something that feels kind of like a calling toward it. I didn't stop like watching videos or even working on my own chairs at home. And so I had taken a job with a company out west in 2016, and it was a great paying job, but I was miserable. I was just crying every day. And that's when I kind of said, I want a different lifestyle. I want a different way of working. And I was like, upholstery is it for me. That's really what I want to do in this next iteration of my life. And so I quit my job with 5 months after having been there. Everybody and their mom was like, what are you doing? What is happening? you know?
Yep.
And I couldn't like just okay, I don't need to in this iteration. You don't need to do that when you're transitioning. And I moved back to DC. I got myself a 1-bedroom apartment, and I put my business on Craigslist. That's what it was. Craigslist. No, I'm sorry. It was Yelp. Yelp business, and I advertised that way. And it was my name at this time because the first iteration of upholstery was Third and Grace, but this time I was like, I'm going to use my name. And I had to, stand on that and make sure that I had the structure, that I had a vision for how I wanted to work. And it was just my 1 bedroom, and I converted my dining room into my studio space. And that's where I did all of my work. All my tools, supplies, everything was right there for 2 years. Wow. So yeah, a long way around.
Yeah. But I mean,
there, yeah.
I feel like, so when you were a photo editor, like, did you go to school for photography and that kind of work?
I didn't know. I went to school for English. My major, I was an English major, and I loved history, so I studied both of those. But I took a photo internship at Essence Magazine in 2006, right before I graduated from college. And that experience really opened my eyes because I thought I wanted to be a full-time photographer, going out, to different countries and photographing different things. And I was like, I love this idea of collaborating with designers and putting together a package, and you get to see, how they work with photographers and being on sets. All that stuff just excited me. And so I decided I wanted to become a photo editor. And that I did for about 10 years, working with, I started with AARP in DC. I worked with the Washington Post, overseeing like food, celebrity, fashion, travel, basically all the features. And then when I was at the Post, I was there for about 2 years. Actually, I was there for 2 years, and then I got promoted to the features photo position. And 3 months within that job, I got an email from a recruiter at Netflix asking me to, talk to them about a position. And I thought it was spam, honestly, because I was like, who from, Netflix is emailing me in my work account. So I deleted that email and I went about my business.
Right.
And then about a week later, they wrote back and they were like, hey, sis, just following up on our notes, are you interested in talking? And I was like, oh, okay. And, it was exciting. It sounded very cool and all that stuff. But the photo editing part of me, it is still such a big love of mine because I love print. I love finding and emerging photographers. I just like visuals. I'm a super visual person. And that translates too to my upholstery work now in so many different ways, like not just, when framing them and photographing them or finding out the right backdrop for them, but even in like coming up with their designs, it is collaborative to some degree, whether it's with clients or just me in conversation with that piece of furniture of like, okay, what's the story that I'm trying to tell with this? And what are the parts that need to come together to convey that story? So I find that correlation really fun still.
Well, and I think too, like you said, like, I think it can give you the background of just like design. Like someone might not think from the outset, like, photographer, editor, like leads to design, but like the places you worked with, I think gave you like kind of that angle of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that was where I kind of cut my teeth with design was, asking questions or even taking some criticism, about like, okay, why this photo, not that photo, or the placement of a certain photo, or even just how to convey, work with the photographer to say,
Mhm.
this is the type of story we're trying to get. Here are the shots that I need, or working with editors. Like a lot of it is the communication. It's conveying your vision so that someone else understands it, so that you can, execute this project in a way that all parties are satisfied. And um, a bit of it is psychology too, which I
Mhm.
think is when working with clients, upholstery work definitely has that, because some clients, they may have already envisioned how they want a piece to look in their home or their office space. But me as a designer, I'm trying to also bring a bit of my talent, my eye to this
Yeah.
project. 'Cause I hope that's why you hire me as well, is you saw something that I'm doing that you want on your furniture.
Mhm.
And so it's me not so much trying to bring them to my side, but showing them, I want to make this piece an extension of you. And here are the prints and the patterns that we can use and sort of pair together to complement that,
Mhm.
if you're open to that possibility. So I really love thinking about the crossover between photography and photo editing, because yeah, to your point, it all is design, just
Yeah.
different titles.
Yep. Yep. Today's episode is sponsored by Athena Outfitters. Athena Outfitters is a quality workwear brand for hardworking women that sells everything badass beauties need to get the job done, from work boots to basics. They curate the toughest essentials made to help you perform. Every piece is handpicked to seamlessly slide right into your daily lifestyle, from rugged and roguish weekday wear to effortless weekend flair. You can fill your closet with gear that can do it all. So for Christmas, I ordered my wife like a very nice pair of slippers from Athena Outfitters, and she loves them. Loves them so much that she has accidentally gone to the gym and the grocery store in them because they seem to never leave her feet. So definitely a place to go check out, go get the goods that help you not only out in the shop, but just in your daily work around the house and outdoors. As a listener of the podcast, you can go to Athena Outfitters website and use coupon code as in M&M's 15 for 15% off any purchase. So again, you go to athenaoutfitters.com and use the code MM15 and get 15% off of your purchase at checkout. Now, I mean, I know because like I, follow you on social media, like you've been kind of doing like your own line of
Hmm.
of things. So how does that play in like with working with clients? Are you like doing more of one thing versus the other, or are you kind of
Yeah, and this goes back to that whole shift,
mhm,
moving, back to Minneapolis in the middle of the pandemic. Is I have been really wanting to step away from client work for a while. Not that I don't enjoy it, I just was taking on
mhm,
too high of a volume, and I wanted to just get my vision back out there, ideas that I had. And the past, like last year, I didn't take on a single client project. And it really gave me space to do a deep dive into what are patterns that I'm curious about? What are color palettes,
mhm,
colorways? How do I want my work to shift? And I'm so grateful for that time, because I had a lot of answers, a lot of clarity. And I feel for the most part, I'm really comfortable creating my pieces now. And then if folks want to engage with them, buy them, that is wonderful too. I'm kind of branching into different products as well, even
mhm.
beyond just chairs, so that folks can engage with my work in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah.
But I will take on client projects sort of on a case by case, just because it can be quite intense. You're really invested. It's like interior
Yeah.
design. You're working with the project for months. You're with back and forth emails and phone calls. So I've been thinking about kind of how I want to expend my energy throughout the day, and putting it into the furniture that then can go to, a showroom or a store or a
Mhm,
museum. For me, that feels a bit more fulfilling,
mhm.
um, because I can just spend a lot more time with the piece and with fabrics. So I would say right now it's about 90% me working on my own stuff, and then 10% is, clients or even brand partnerships, which has been really good too. because I get to share the work on a different platform.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I have so many questions and I'm trying to like be like, how can I get them all in?
Bring them on. Bring them
So
on. This is
some
so
of
fun.
it's gonna be some of it's gonna be like this is probably gonna be kind of down in the weeds, but it's really like, you know, what I'm curious about as I hear you talking about this. So one of them is like you started by like sourcing the furniture pieces, like you said, from like Craigslist and those types of places. Um, I mean, are you still sourcing like pre-made stuff, or are you also like designing from scratch, like, you know, the full furniture piece?
Yeah, it's both. So I love sourcing. It's just in general. I love thrifting, going to
Mhm.
antique markets and fairs. So I was literally on the road. Well, not literally. I was driving the other evening, picking up this beautiful chair and ottoman set from a woman off of Facebook Marketplace,
Mhm.
and that's become a major sourcing hub for me. Honestly, Facebook Marketplace has a ton of stuff, almost too much for my heart because I need to, take a little distance.
Yeah.
But Minneapolis has so many great vintage, antique places. I can't wait for the summer when there's just more outdoor markets
Yeah.
happening. But a big portion of my work is sourcing. I like to get um, already, things that already exist in the world because there's so many pieces that could go to landfills, that could just
Yep.
be put on the sidewalks. And I like to repurpose that, give it new life, keep it in the ecosystem so that it's not, again, going to waste if it doesn't
Yeah.
have to. There's something about salvaging and repurposing an older piece in a new, fresh way that really excites me. It's kind of a challenge. I like to see how I can recreate it. But then I'm also working with a woodworker who actually works on the floor right below me in my studio to help build a couple of chairs that I've had in my sketchbook for years.
Mm.
And some of those chairs I was able to have created through my partnership with World Market, which was amazing. But there's a couple of pieces, I think just because of, their size and the sort of mechanics, it
Yep.
makes more sense for me to do a one-off piece and work with a specialized sort of woodworker or carpenter on that. And so that's my dream someday, is just to be able to have these really unique chairs from my sketchbook that I can produce with someone. So I'm trying to build the relationship right now, because again, that's super intimate too. And then other products, that are like napkin rings. I've got a set of napkin rings that I want to create that are really sculptural and ornate, because I love thinking about. Well, I love dining for one. I like to eat, so the dining table is a big gathering space for me and lots of people, right?
Yep.
So I want to create more sort of products that are centered on the dining space, and the napkin ring is just a fun detail. It's like something you almost wouldn't notice, but it helps just fill out that table. So I'm really interested in that. But yeah, people donate chairs to me. They'll message and say, hey, I've got a piece that's just been in my basement for 10 years. Would you like to have it? All of that stuff excites me. I rarely will say no to a piece of furniture. If I can help it, if I can get it in my car or borrow my boyfriend's car or whatever it is, we're going to figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, do you like, how do you know something like has good bones? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because that's sometimes some of like, I mean, I get, my wife doesn't let me go to the vintage places anymore because I just buy. I'm like, I want to buy all of the things, and then like I don't actually follow through with the rest of it. But
she said you can't just store it.
That's right. But when I see some of these things, like sometimes my problem is like, even as a woodworker, right? I can tell, usually I can tell like, okay, this is at least made from like real wood and it's not just like compressed like fiberboard or whatever. But like the design aspect of being like, is this something that's just like been manufactured 1,000 times over, or is this something that's like a true like gem?
Yeah. That's like everything you said right there. I just love, because I'm trying to do that assessment each time I find a piece. It's like, what about this? Why do I want to take this home with me? And a lot of times it's the frame or the sort of details and the ornate fixtures of the frame. Like I like a chair that has a unique frame that's not, something that seems manufactured, which is the irony, me having a collection that is manufactured.
Right.
But it's like, the chair that I got recently, it's an antique slipper chair, and it just has this beautiful curves and carved details. But I'm also like pushing on the wood before I purchase it to see, okay, are the dowels kind of loose?
Yeah.
Does it seem like, it's I don't know if there's, and really once you start to strip a chair, that's when you can tell more bit about the value and if it's worth keeping. Because sometimes you can't tell that if there's water damage, or if the wood is cracked or warped, or if there's, mold with the padding material. And the padding and the fabric, all that is cosmetic. So if you ever encounter a chair and you're like, ooh, it just looks really old, you can get rid of that. That's a simple change out. So it's more about the frame. And to your point, the real versus kind of that, what is that kind of wood? Like the cork, or
like the particle board type
particle
stuff.
board. Yes. Yeah. If it's heavier weight, if it's just heavier to lift, like that's quality to me right there. There was a tree, that had to go through some things to become what this chair or this piece of furniture is. And so those kind of things help for me to assess the value, but also my time investment. Do I want to give this chair new life? If the springs are loose, if the bottom seems like it's sagging a little bit, again, those things can be lifted. You can reinforce the bottom. You can replace any of the inside material, but it's the wood that you really want to make sure. And if it is loose, if the chair is kind of like, I can't think of that word, but if you can kind of rock it a little bit, and I'm sure you can attest to this, but that is something you could take to like a woodworker and have them tighten and assess. So I'm always of the mind to like keep it, but if it really is, parts are missing, broken, cracked, warped, let it go. It's okay. That chair has had a full life, I'm sure.
Yes. Now, the other thing I'm curious about with sourcing is like the fabrics. As I watched some of your stuff you post on social media, I was curious, like, are you making your own prints or are you sourcing it all?
I'm sourcing my prints right now. So I'm actually working with a company to make my own fabrics, because that's also been not a long time dream, but just something I've become more curious about as I've been doing upholstery. There's so many great swatches that have come through my studio. So I kind of felt like I didn't need to have my own fabrics, just because there's something out there that I could absolutely find and love. But I feel like if I'm continually talking about storytelling and creating unique designs with my furniture, I want that to be a full circle story that involves me building the piece and, the fabrics coming from a bit of my own history, a bit of my personal story is in there. And so I'm just trying to figure out, I gravitate toward geometric fabrics. That is my favorite. I tried to break out of it, but it permeates so much of my work and just what I like to look at visually. And so I'm just trying to make some sketches right now of some fabrics that kind of mimic that, and different colorways too that I want to see or hope to see people using a lot more in their furniture work. I love green. It's my favorite color. And I want to have more creative types of green that are outside of like leaf prints or more foliage types of things, which I love and again are beautiful and I use all the time. But it's a challenge for me too, just to push and create a new visual in the world. Because I'm like, if I'm going to make something that already exists, people already can have access to, I want to inject a different sort of aesthetic in there that isn't out in the world yet.
Yeah. I know I told you, like, outside of this conversation that I got into grad school, and
congratulations.
Thank you. It's an MFA program, around like furniture design and 3D design. That's like the main focus. But then like as part of the program, you're taking something that's almost like you're building basically like a minor into that. And so like I've been doing a lot of thinking around that. And I think I'm going to struggle because originally I thought graphic design is what I'm actually going to try to do, because graphic designers are expensive and I need, you know what I mean? Like I need that work for my business.
That's right. So you are not lying.
No. So I was thinking about that, but then I also remember like during my tour there, she mentioned that a lot of people who do the 3D design program kind of do the minor in printmaking because they end up printing, making their own prints for their own like upholstery
Oh,
work. And that's just like
yeah.
really kind of been rolling around more and more in my head of like, that could be really fun, like to be able to bring
Huge.
that in, you know?
Huge. And
Yeah,
like just a different, you know, avenues where that
e-
can go. Like the
exactly.
printmaking clearly isn't just for furniture, but there's draping, there's
Hmm.
collaborations with brands, you know, there's clothing, there's just a, I mean, even flatware, you know,
Yeah.
there's so many ways to incorporate printmaking. And that's what I think is so fun and fascinating about it to me. It's the designs are awesome, but just their multiple usages.
Hmm.
I'll say towels. Yeah, towels, rugs. I love pattern. At one point, I tried to convince myself that I was a minimalist, and I was like, "You are lying. You are nuts. That's not your ministry." And I just love print. I love big, bold prints and mixing as many of them as I can.
Hmm.
So I'm super excited about this possibility, this minor for you.
Yeah.
And if you decide to go down that, what avenues will open up? Let me know.
Exactly. But I mean, that does lead me like to the other line of questions that were kind of rolling around my head for you, were things like a little bit of the nuts and bolts of like how did you get with like world market? How do you get like
Yeah.
in with brands to like drive this into more of a line? And you know, because
Hmm.
I would say as like artists, as maker people, like we have to find like have several avenues of revenue, right? It's like you can't put
Yeah.
all of your eggs in one basket.
So true.
Otherwise you can't support yourself. So it's like I definitely
Exactly.
have my sights on like eventually I want to have my own line, as well as like creating my like unique one of a kind pieces. And so
Yes.
it's like how did you do that? How did you come about that relationship?
Yeah. And I want to give as many details as I can. So if you find that I'm getting long winded or you want to break
Yeah.
things down, let me know. Just stop me because
Okay.
I can chat. So it was June of 2020 when World Market had emailed me, and I was in my studio working on a chair, and I got an email from one of the buyers who was asking, have I ever considered a collection of furniture and fabrics? And like I think I dropped my phone because that's like a surreal email to get, and one that at that
Yeah.
point I didn't expect to get for several years. So I had
Right.
only been working full time for 3 years at that point. And I think part of it, I'm hoping the majority of it came because they had seen my work, just out in the world, or someone had shared it. And they were like, oh my gosh, we love her style. We want that to be part of us. But I think a small part of it is also around that time, there was the George Floyd death,
Mm.
where a lot of companies were, and I don't know how it happened, but they were then conflating, let's support
Yeah.
Black businesses and Black creative businesses. And so there was a wave of new followers and eyeballs, really. And World
Hmm.
Market could have stemmed from that. But I wrote them back and said, absolutely, when do
Right.
y'all want to set up a chat? Let's
Yeah.
let's go. And they were so upfront about it, saying we recognize that within our collection of at least furniture, there's a dearth of prints and bold designs and patterns. And we love that that's the space you're in. We want to put that, on the furniture. And we want you to design the pieces that you've always kind of had. So it was an invitation to create new stuff, but also reimagine some of their own pieces with my fabrics. And it was a tedious process. Like honestly, we're still very much you know doing back and forth emails, but the conversation started with terms and a contract. And
Hmm.
I had never worked with a licensing at
Yeah.
all. So
Yeah.
I reached out to a friend, Justina Blakeney, who, queen of print
Oh my
pattern.
God, I
She's
love
got
Justina.
products. She is like the truth. Okay.
Yes.
Justina is amazing. I love her dearly. And I'm so grateful that she, answered my message. And when I asked her if I could just kind of chat for a bit to get some feedback, and she gave me lots of great insight about specific language to have on your contract,
Hmm.
negotiating royalties for retail versus wholesale, what to get for your upfront rate.
Hmm.
Because I was thinking in my sort of naivete, I was like, oh, okay, I will propose a rate, for me creating these sketches and working with them. And then, that rate has to be like the highest one right there. And I was like, no, honey, the money is in the royalties. Okay.
Hmm.
So I'm so grateful. My best friend's sister is a lawyer, and
Okay.
she graciously looked over, she combed through my contract like with a fine tooth comb and threw out so many terms, added new stuff, and really advocated for me based on what I wanted to happen for myself. And she, a big thing she did was negotiating like liability in case, something
Yep.
happens while this
Yep.
furniture is in someone's possession, which is something I didn't even think about.
Mhm.
Who owns things, because the original contract was that World Market would own it all. And she was like, no, they can own this specific fabric on this specific chair, but they
Right.
don't own your sketches. They don't own, the design of your work. And that, can open up possibilities for me down the road if I decide to use that same furniture style, but with different
Mhm.
fabrics. And that was something that Justina also pushed and allocated for or advocated for, was to own everything. It's your name, it's your brand. I worked for the first time with a lawyer to get a trademark on
Mhm.
both my name as it pertains to appearances and where it was
Mhm.
TV and branding, but also as a service, providing a service and a product, because that adds so much protection right there,
Yeah.
and also increases your value when you're trying to negotiate hopefully future contracts for licensing. Um, and so we also negotiated higher royalties as well, because the brand is not going to tell you initially how many SKUs they're going to buy, how many pieces of furniture are going to
Right.
be sold. But you will find that out when they send you an email and say, hey, here's the royalty based on, we bought all the furniture. This is what
Mhm.
we've assessed the value or what we're selling it at. And that to me was like super eye opener right there. I was like, oh, my sketches, to be quite transparent with
Mhm.
your listeners about numbers if I can. So they paid me 10,000 for my sketches, but the
Okay.
royalties were like, 50 times that,
Yeah.
because those pieces are going to every store across the country, and they are going to make a large chunk, hopefully, from
Yeah.
those sales.
Yeah.
And so the more you can negotiate your royalties, just the better position for you.
And you still
Um,
owned that, like you said, you
mhm,
still owned the sketches and stuff like that.
exactly. And when I sent them the sketches, I also, this was at the request of my lawyer, I dated them and I signed them and I scanned them so that
Mm.
there was never going to be an argument about who made these sketches down the road.
Yeah.
And so all those kinds of protections I'm so grateful for, because you do get caught up in that shiny object, like, oh, the
Right.
excitement is amazing. And you want to make sure that you're playing nice or whatever.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that's what gets a lot of creatives caught up too, is the lack of protecting your IP as much as you can.
Yep.
And there's throughout this process, because again, it's been about 2.5 years, there's been a lot of advocating and saying and pushing back too. As much as I'm excited about the progress, there's also the note of like, no, I don't want this, or this timeline doesn't work, or that color palette doesn't work for me, or I would like to have another design option to offer people.
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, it's your name
Yeah.
that's on it. No one is going to see the buyer behind the
Right.
scenes. They're going to
Right.
see, it's Nicole Crowder Upholstery on the shelf floor. And so that muscle for me was also strengthened over this period of time, because now I'm like, okay, I can go to another brand, even if I pitch to them or if they reach out to me, and know this is a vision that I carry and that I can also advocate for myself and not feel like, I'm pissing anybody off, or if I'm
Right.
looking like the bad person. It's your name, it's your style, it's your vision at the end of the day. And that's super, super valuable. It's invaluable.
And
Um,
they were taking care of all of the, was there any negotiation around like them taking care of all the manufacturing of everything? Hey makers, today's episode is sponsored in part by toolmomstore.com. At toolmomstore.com, you can find any and all tool-based merchandise for all genders, all sizes. They've got mugs, they've got shirts, all kinds of cool stuff. I have one of the shirts myself that has the hashtag woodwork her on it. And I also have a couple of the mugs that define what and who is a tool chick. So super excited with the merchandise that I have. I know that you will be satisfied as well. And also, great discount for those of you who listen to the podcast. At checkout, if you enter the code MAKERMOM, you will get a 20% discount off any of the merchandise that you buy. So that's just toolmomstore.com. All right, let's head back into the action.
So yeah, they took care of all the manufacturing. Literally, I had to just provide sketches, and then they had a timeline for who they were working with. The, shipping, of course, there was a lot of delays with COVID and with cargo, but the area where we did sort of where I did have to advocate most was around the promotion and social media, because in the contract, it didn't specify, and I should have specified this, a breakdown of, okay, you all are pitching to XY. There's going to be a photo shoot. There's going to be these different tiers for promoting the work. And they had reached out to me about obtaining a headshot because they were going to start to pitch to press. And I was like, okay, wonderful. I had happened to have a photographer here in Minneapolis take some new headshots of me because I had just moved here, just moved into my studio. And I was like, I'm looking cute today. Let's get some shots taken. And so I sent them one of those photos just to send internally, for press pitches. But unbeknownst to me, they had planned to use that photo for the whole promotion, to put in store. And I was like, well, let's take a pause, because I pay the photographer a personal rate to do this.
Right.
You all are asking for commercial rights now, because that's where this falls into. And this is where my photo editor background kicks in, because dealing with contracts and editorial versus commercial rights all the time.
Right.
And I said, also, why would you not have a photo shoot for this collection that you have put so much time and resources into? And that's when I got on the phone with one of the VP of marketing, and she was saying they hadn't planned to do a photo shoot. And when I started to say, okay, this to me feels frustrating, because this is the first time that you all are working with a Black designer. And, I feel a bit like the work will get buried if it is not promoted, in a reasonable sort of way. And also, if you don't have budget for a photo shoot, you're not going to just not pay a photographer to have their work be featured in your store to sell your product. There's a whole gap right there that I want to make sure we're on the same page about. And the next day I got an email and say, we're going to do a photo shoot. We're going to fly you out to Oakland. And so that's how even the promotional photos for the collection came about, is just sometimes you have to push back. It might seem like a very obvious thing, like, why would you not have photos of this collection? But brands are doing a ton of things right now. And if it's your vision, if this is like, you're serious about the quality of work you want out in the world, there's no voice that can quiet that. And so this was all me just speaking up for myself. I don't have a manager. I don't have a publicist. I just have an attorney and myself. And
well, and it's really, it's great that you have like that background knowledge too. Like I didn't have that background knowledge about photography myself. And I came into a situation where it was like, I was writing an article for like, a national magazine, and they were paying me a good amount just for writing it. And they wanted, lots of pictures included. And so it's like, I just happened to have a photographer friend who's amazing. And because I wanted to put like my best foot forward on, this was my first publication. I was like, will you help me out and I'll pay you to like, do these pictures. And he did, and then he like started talking to me, and he's like, because it turned out I ended up, one of his photos, they're like, these are amazing. We're going to use it for the cover of the magazine, which was, again, at first it was like, ooh, shiny object. Like, this is amazing. Right. But then I had known enough from the conversation with him about basically like, look, they're getting free pictures out of you. And this is this is crazy. And, he's like, I did my work. I dove into the publication, and he's like, they have the money. And so he was like, no. And having that conversation with him allowed me to then advocate with the editor, like, this is really great. However, I'm going to negotiate a separate fee for the cover photo alone.
That's
because
right.
You need to pay this photographer, because this is completely different than what we had negotiated before.
That is right. Oh, I'm so happy you did that, because even working on the photo editor side, it is very common, where if you can get a free image, wonderful, and
Right.
if it's high quality resolution,
Right.
like we will take it and not pay anything.
Right.
But there is a great difference between like a feature spot photo and then a cover photo.
Yes.
And even, with a small publication, it's like a minimum of $5,000, for that, for a cover, because you're helping to sell their product, basically. It might be free promo for you, but the photographer, the stylist, whoever,
right,
they're putting up their service as well. So yeah, I'm really sensitive to those things too, just in general, whether it's like giving credit to people online or whatever it is, like that part of my brain comes to the forefront.
Yeah, I mean, I think like that alone is a skill that I don't think a lot of like I think there's benefit for a lot of content creators to understand some of that, like right from the start. Like I'm one who definitely fell into like not understanding that, right? Like at the get-go, because that was just not my world. It's like, well, I'm just putting out this stuff. But understanding is like, no, you need to give credit to like everybody involved.
And it's understandable. Well, it's like, it's common, I think, for that to have happened, especially with, you have so many social platforms and sites like Tumblr, years ago, that was a hot spot for photos and imagery just being shared without credit to the original creator. And Instagram, falls into that space too. So it's it's like we all have a part in that. If I see some of your work is out here, I'm like, okay, tag my girl. Like, making sure that it comes right back to you. Yeah.
So you said something in talking about that whole, like, kicking off kind of that campaign with them about being the first Black designer to work with them?
Not the first to work with them, but to do their furniture, because they've worked with Jen Hewitt, who I love, and she's got amazing pattern designs. And she did a bunch of, I think it was napkins and stuff, but in terms of their furniture, the first. And I didn't know that until I was starting to dig in and do the research, but because they work with people from all around the world.
Right.
But there's so many companies that, and this was a statistic that came out, I think it was in 2020, maybe it was 2019. But of all the furniture companies in the world, like less than 1% feature or have work by Black designers. And, that's also why I was pushing so heavily for my photo to be there. It's less an ego thing of like, I need you all to know that my work is great, but it's like, no, you need to know that a Black woman, her face is the one that created these pieces. And if you're a brand who is trying to not atone, but acknowledge, that you have had a dearth of working with Black women or people of color in general, I don't want you to hide our faces like that. And I had this critique of publications who, again, this was around June and July of 2020, where there was tons and tons of listicles of 10 Black designers to follow, 20 people shifting the culture. What's great about that is, yes, there is some acknowledgement, but it's a different kind of visibility than when you give someone like a whole page or a section, a story. It's not just part of a list. It's like they have space to tell their story and to tell and to share images of their work. That's how you get a robust picture of someone and make a connection to them. When I think of the designers or creatives or people in general who I've admired from afar, because I've seen and I read their story, I've had time to sit with their story, whether it was in print or digital. I want that same latitude to be given to designers of color. And it was really important for me to push that point with World Market. And to be quite frank, to shame them a little bit and say, are you all comfortable with this? Because I can see this. And it's a tricky space, right? Because you don't want to call out a brand, especially when you're working with. But I feel like sometimes you have to call a thing and hold people accountable, because that's how, actions change a lot of time.
Now, I think with 2020 and, the murder of George Floyd, like, and I've said this on the podcast with other guests, like, it makes me sad that the world was not giving you all the credit that you deserved before that. Like, that makes me extremely sad that it took the murder of somebody, and for us to not be able to look away, for that to be righted some. And then does it continue? Like, you got a whole influx of like eyeballs, like you said, and a lot of the, you know, Black makers that I'm like friends with, same thing, like they got a lot of attention on social media, which I was happy for because they deserved it all along. But like, it's like now it feels like, okay, we did our work, we're done. Like, we don't like, we don't need to keep pushing this, you know. So I'm curious, like, do you feel that? And like with people with like World Market, do you feel like they're continuing to push themselves to have better representation?
I think some brands are, for sure. I feel like they have been, whether they were called out kind of publicly, or some brands were doing that work, you know, and they're like, we're just still trying to stay in that lane. And show that this isn't just for as a trend sort of thing. And for me, to be honest, I feel really grateful because I haven't felt like I've been, you know, looked over, or any opportunities have been skirted. Lots of partnerships have continually reached out and given me, you know, more space to amplify my work, and to even ask, like, how would you like to engage with us, versus saying, this is what we want you to do, which I feel like I feel really fortunate for that. So I think there was a shift, you know, at least for me personally, with 2020. In part, the brands reaching out to me, but also me advocating for myself. There was just an email I sent yesterday, actually. A brand had offered, you know, me to be part of a series, or to host a series, and the rate that they provided was below for what I would typically want. And I was just like, we're going to go ahead and push back a little bit, see if there's some flexibility there to, you know, increase that. And they wrote back to me and said, yes, we can accommodate that. And I feel like in part it is brands knowing artists they've given themselves permission to have a larger voice, and to say, I'm willing to pass up on an opportunity if it means that, you know, we're not aligned in our intention with working together. It's less about the artists needing the brand, and more about the brands really needing these artists, you know, needing creatives, because we are what helps to promote your work. You know, we are what helps to give your platform its voice, its kind of flavor. And why would you not want to work with people and meet them, you know, in an even playing field, and to see people? Like, I want everyone to be amplified in work. You know, if you're white, Black, brown, like, I want it to be your work that is giving you that visibility, and where a brand recognizes that and says, okay, you assess your work as having this value, we're going to meet you there because we respect you that much. That's how I feel. I hope for the brands that are kind of newly coming to the realization that, like, creatives of color out there, but they are really doing the internal work of saying, okay, how do we make this part of the tapestry of our work culture, of our ethos? And it's not something where we're just spurting out, you know, a few people of color on our Instagram page every couple of weeks, but like, integrate that. And if it takes time, that's okay, because to me that shows more genuine effort versus like, this quarter we're focusing on, you know, the Blacks. So
or it's like,
you know,
it's February, so we need to get like
exactly. Or and I was so grateful, let me tell you, that no one had reached out in February to do anything. I was like, I can rest. You know, that's also just as important, to like not overwork the creatives. We, you know, these sort of arbitrary timelines of deliverables. I was like, do you know we are still in a pandemic? Like, why do you need this within a week? What's the urgency? Child, it's digital. You're fine. So yeah. Oh my goodness.
Do you feel like peers in your space have been good about stepping up in advocating for artists of color, like within the kind of furniture and upholstery world.
Absolutely. Like that's one of the amazing things I think about being in this space. And I don't know if it's just furniture and upholstery specifically, but
Mhm.
there's so many amazing women who are also upholsterers, and we just champion one another. But even, people who are not women,
Yeah.
share our work, uh, tag us in stories, in post. If there's a platform that's like, hey, tag your favorite small businesses or
Yeah.
Black businesses or whatever, they're always like tagging, me, my great friends, just other people who are out here doing that work in whatever industry it is, whether it's
Yeah.
furniture, fashion, photography. I feel like um, there's just been this sort of shift of people's language, and like, I want to create, but I also want rest.
Yeah.
I don't want to just produce content all the time. We can do it and we enjoy doing it, but there's also that balance of like, but I don't have to do it for the clicks, for the likes, for the shares, for the hope that a brand sees me. I'm very much of the mind, like when you're doing great work, it's going to be amplified. I didn't have a single publicist. I'm kind of awful, honestly, at selling myself. Um, I put it out on Instagram because I enjoy it. I'm a visual
Mhm.
girl, and that it gets shared by other people and somehow finds its way to, a person who is in charge of paying me. That's wonderful. But I think it definitely comes because people are supporting one another.
Mhm.
Um, and I feel like you can ask people to do that as well. Some folks are a little shy. I have some friends for sure who have fantastic businesses, but are really, really hesitant to promote themselves or to ask other people to promote it. And I feel like when people genuinely want to, they will do that if you ask or not. I don't think it's sometimes our ego, kind of prevents us
Well, it's
from.
like that it's like that TikTok clip, right? Of like, why am I not famous yet? Because you haven't shared my shit. Like,
Hello.
exactly,
Hello. It's just like, and your friends can support you in that
Yeah.
way too. It
Yeah.
doesn't even have to be a purchase. It's literally just like a
Exactly.
reshare on the stories. It'll be gone in 24 hours.
Yeah.
But my grandmother used to always say, like, it never costs you a thing to be kind to someone. It
Mhm.
never costs you a thing to um, encourage someone either. And I feel like, especially with just so many of us out here, creating content, creating products, there's a lot um, to take in visually. I try to find that balance of like what I'm promoting to sell and what I'm just sharing. Because I realize, some people engage with Instagram, and I use Instagram because that's the primary platform that I use
Yeah.
to share my work. But it's felt like a marketplace to some people where everyone is trying to sell you something. And I try to make it a space where that's not the case. I just want you to come and engage, see something
Mhm.
beautiful, look at a pattern, in a way that you might not have before. And if you would like to engage the work, that invitation is there too. But ultimately, it's up to me to figure out how I'm going to sustain my livelihood
Right.
and make sure that I'm able to pay my bills and stuff, because it's a lot of pressure, and I don't think it's fair pressure to put on people who are also operating in this capitalist society to be
Yeah.
like, buy this stuff, share
Right.
everything, support me. It's and that's why, and you said this earlier, having your hands in many different pots is
Yeah.
really, really important. Yeah.
Yes.
Because I
Yeah.
don't be working, past, up to a certain point. Like I enjoy working because I do, but I also don't want to have to, overwork my body just to pay my
Right.
bills.
Yeah. And
Mm-mm.
I mean, like upholstery's physical work for sure.
Super physical.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I make massage as part of my healthcare plan. Let me tell you, every week I'm just like, yes, this is what I need because it's part of my work.
Yeah. I need to start
Mhm.
doing that. I haven't done that yet.
Yes,
Massage is part of my like
get
healthcare plan.
get on it. It changes the game because the first time I went in there, the massage therapist was like, "Oh, are you in construction? Like your back feels like a rock." I'm
Yeah.
like, "Ooh, ooh." Meanwhile, I'm just going along to go along, bending
Yep.
and stretching. So yeah, those breaks are crucial.
Hmm. Well, we're at getting close to the end of our time together. So I want to make
Oh,
sure, I know it went fast. I
super
want to make
fast.
sure that I give you a chance to let you tell the people like how they can find your work, where to go find your work, all the good stuff.
Yeah, well, I so appreciate your listeners for listening to this episode. It's been fun,
Mhm.
and you all can check me out on Instagram at Nicole M as in Marie Crowder, and I just literally last week got on the TikTok, but it is mostly the same video from Instagram on TikTok,
Mhm.
and I'm there at Nicole Crowder as well. And then my website is NicoleCrowderUpholstery.com, where I'm selling meditation pillows and some puzzles that I made, but also some new work that I'm going to be putting up there shortly.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time this morning or afternoon.
Oh, thank you for having me. This
Yeah.
this was wonderful. Like honestly, I haven't had a chance to engage with a fellow creative in this way and really get into the minutia of the work. So this was a treat for me. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So again, that was Nicole Crowder, and I will include the links on how you can follow along with her and see her work in the show notes for today's episode. The best places to find that is check the description on your podcast app for the episode. If you're watching this on the Freeman Furnishings YouTube channel, check the description box down below, or head on over to freemanfurnishings.com/podcast, and you can find the show notes for today's episode as well as all the previous episodes. Make sure to follow along with the podcast at Crafting a Revolution over on Instagram. And that is where you can best find resources or ways to support the podcast. The link in the bio, again, at Crafting a Revolution on Instagram, will take you a couple of places. It will take you over to Patreon if you want to do a ongoing monthly support, or it will also have an option there to do a one-time donation. So again, at Crafting Revolution on Instagram. If you're enjoying the podcast and you want to support it, but not in a monetary way, that is also welcomed. Just please share about the podcast on Instagram at Crafting Revolution. Make sure to always tag it so that we see it. And also you can head on over to iTunes and Spotify, especially. Make sure you hit subscribe, like, and leave a review. You might want to reach out to your host of the podcast. My name again is Katie Freeman, and you can find me on Instagram at Freeman Furnishings, where you'll find me power carving, general woodworking, and an occasional resin project like I'm working on right now, along with some shop dances thrown in just to keep it spicy. So you can find me again over there at Freeman Furnishings. You can find my co-host, Katie Thompson, in a couple of places on Instagram. Maybe her main one being Women of Woodworking. That is a passion project of hers that has been going on for years now, where she highlights other women in the field of woodworking. And then a more recent endeavor of hers, Pen and Chisel, which is a monthly online journal. So you can also check that out as well. So this is the last episode for this week, and next week we will be back with one brand new episode. And in the meantime, as always, let's go craft a revolution.
She, her, them, they got something they wanna say. Solution for the toxic masculinity.